Should I pay off my mortgage first and then start investing? Or should I just get started with investing straight away? Well, what if I told you could actually do both? You could tackle both goals at the same time and quite possibly add some very valuable efficiency in your wealth creation journey. Let's break this down together. This is Sugar Mama's Fireplay Podcast. Welcome back, everyone. I hope that you are well, and I also hope that my podcast channel is helping give you some hope and some inspiration in an increasingly financially stressful world that we are all living in. If you are under financial stress and pressure right now, please know that I hear you, I see you, and I feel you. The only way to get through this tough time is to continue on focusing on your goals and your vision, but also at the same time, continue on learning about money, understanding money, so that you know how to use your money wisely. You know how to protect your money, and best of all, you know how to grow and build your money. So whatever position you are in right now, please stay focused. Please keep your chin up and your shoulders back and continue on focusing on the solutions rather than drowning in the problem. I promise you things will get easier, things will get better. All right, so today I want to talk to you about a very powerful and efficient financial strategy to help build wealth, and that is called debt recycling. Now, with all of my content, it is extremely important that I remind you of the general advice warning. That is to remind you that all of my content is for educational purposes only. It's never personal advice, investment advice, strategic advice, or product advice. And this is particularly important for this episode today because we're talking about a pretty high-risk strategy that a lot of people use, and a lot of people use perhaps not knowing or fully understanding all the risks involved. So I'm going to do my best job to explain all the pros and cons, particularly the risks, but also how to help manage those risks to the best of your ability. Now, if you are listening to this particular episode and you think, oh, this is actually something I really need to have a serious think about and consider using, please make sure that after you have listened to this episode that you grab a copy of Mindful Money and have a read of that, because I break this down into a lot more detail and I even give you examples and case studies. But secondly, if you're thinking about doing this after reading Mindful Money and listening to this episode, please make sure that you go and speak to your accountant, your financial planner, and your mortgage broker and get advice from them. And then make sure that they are all in contact and communication with each other so that you are all singing off the same page together. And I have to say, when your accountant, broker, and financial planner are all in direct communication with each other, it means that you've got 4 people, including yourself, brainstorming different ideas, different strategies, even different loopholes that are only going to help magnify your wealth creation journey. All right, so today, as I said, we're going to talk about debt recycling. That is how to pay off your mortgage and invest at the same time. Now, this is an extremely powerful strategy that allows you, as I said, to pay off the home loan and stay true to those debt-free goal journeys that you have in your life, but also invest outside of the family home and invest in assets that will grow in value and hopefully provide you with some other sources of passive income. Now, as mentioned, this is a high-risk strategy. It's not one that you want to jump in head first. You need to really leave no stone unturned and look at every single what-if scenarios that could go wrong and could go right. But also, I have to say, some of these risks are manageable to a certain degree, and that's what I'm going to touch on, a few of these strategies in this particular episode. Now, I will also say I'm talking top line. There is a lot more to consider beyond this, but if I was to go into every single thing you could possibly consider for this, I think this episode would go for about 12 hours. I will also point out that this strategy is not for everyone. Whilst it is powerful when used in the right way, in a sensible way, a wise way, at the right time, for the right people, for the right long-term reasons. Now, for someone who's listening to this thinking, okay, this is not the episode for me because I don't have a home loan, or I don't own a property, or I have no intention to ever do something like borrowing to invest, and you're about to press pause and find another episode to listen to, please don't. The thing with financial planning and building wealth is it's always about choices. You want to have as many choices as possible. And when you're on that wealth creation journey, you want to know, or you should know, a wide range of different wealth accumulation strategies, because whilst it may not suit you right now, by understanding what different things are out there, you will instinctively know if and when it is the right strategy for you to use at a certain point in time. And yes, you may not have a mortgage or a home right now, but things can suddenly change in the blink of an eye. The universe works in powerful ways. Or if you have a home loan and you think, my mortgage is too big, I could never possibly even consider taking on a debt recycling strategy, you never know what is just around the corner. You might win some money. You might inherit some money. You might have an insurance policy payout. You might get an incredible pay rise or promotion. Your business just suddenly may explode. So it is really important, and I believe of great value, to know and understand what debt recycling is. Because whilst it may be something that you never personally use yourself, it's good to know, because people talk about this all the time, and you might maybe mention this to a family member or a friend, and that ends up being extremely valuable to them, because they may go and speak to their financial planner going, maybe I should be doing this themselves. So please don't just bury your head in the sand or have a very narrow-minded vision when it comes to financial literacy. It's important that you know and understand everything that you possibly can that's going on that might help you in some capacity of your life. And I'm pretty sure by the end of this episode, you'll be really intrigued and wondering whether this is something that you can include in your life further down the track when the time is right, or perhaps right now. All right. So what exactly is debt recycling? All right. So in simplistic terms, it is simply borrowing money against your home to invest. You start shifting, or recycling as it's technically called, your non-deductible debt, that is your interest costs, into deductible debt. You know how people say rent money is dead money? Well, I actually personally don't necessarily agree with that, but if you're going to say rent money is dead money, so is interest. Interest is just lining the bank's pockets. You can't claim it off your tax, and of course I'm assuming it's your principal place of residence, but yeah, interest is definitely dead money if you're going to go call rent dead money too. And the thing with debt recycling is it allows you to start diversifying outside of the family home. Now, for Australian households, I think this is really important. There are a lot of people, particularly baby boomers, who have all their wealth tied up in that family home. And they're approaching retirement and they're looking at their superannuation going, oh my goodness, I simply don't have enough. But they don't have any money elsewhere. They never looked at debt recycling, or they never invested elsewhere. It's just literally their home, which they quite often own outright if they're towards that end of that mortgage period of their lives, and a little bit of money in super. And those people are often backed into the corner where they don't have those choices. And their only option to come up with some money is actually to downsize the home. Now, that can be quite convenient for a variety of different reasons, easier living, particularly if someone's got a house with a couple of levels, and maybe an apartment actually works quite well for their health, being closer to, their community or their friends or hospitals or whatever it may be. But you never want to be in a position where you've only got one real option. So with a strategy like this, because the money is used by gearing and borrowing against the home, you can start acquiring other assets and spread your wealth into other things, not have all your eggs in one basket. And so you would borrow money to invest in, I guess, essentially what assets, investment assets that you feel comfortable with. But typically they are two-dimensional assets. So they are assets that grow in value over time through capital growth and provide a very valuable growing passive income over time. Now, these are typically Australian shares, international shares, and property, which are obviously long-term assets, high growth risk profile assets, but assets that can help you, I guess, leverage into other areas that may even exceed the natural value of your own home. And I've seen people use these strategies over a long period of time, sort of 20, 30 years, and their investment portfolio is worth multiples of what the home is actually worth. However, it's not something you jump in head first, and you need to understand all the pros and cons, which I'll go through in a second. But this type of strategy, when used, can actually be very powerful in providing that long-term financial freedom, because essentially what you're buying is long-term growing passive income streams. And you are not subject to what the property market is dictating as the value of your home. There's also obviously amazing tax benefits that come from this, and you would never ever make an investment decision or any financial decision based on the tax benefit of it. But as I said, you are shifting your dead money, that is your interest on your principal place of residence, into investment debt where the interest becomes tax deductible. Now, at the same time, of course, you naturally need to declare any income you've received from those assets that you've purchased, such as dividends or rent. So you need to be obviously aware of how the cash flow is and that net tax effect. But yes, it does help save you tax dollars. It's a tax effective strategy. And this type of strategy can also help supplement and support your retirement income. Where I've seen people use this, and when I say seen, I've helped guide them and recommend them through personal advice. They have been able to retire, and they're retiring off a combination of their income stream from their superannuation and their passive income from their diversified investment portfolio, whilst also living in the comfort of their home, which they own outright. And this is even more important for people who have managed to set themselves up financially before they've been able to legally access their superannuation. That is, they've retired earlier in life before they meet that condition of release, which is typically between 55 and 60, because obviously you can't access your money in super before that unless something quite serious has happened in your life. But typically, no, you can't access it. And this is where that passive income stream that you've established outside of super through something like this type of strategy can be very, very powerful. And then, of course, it goes without saying, you're harnessing the power of compounding interest earlier in life when you do this. You're not waiting to pay off the home loan first and then start investing, which is possibly, and this is not to be a fearmonger at all or to put stress and pressure on you to start using this strategy, far from it. But obviously it makes a lot of sense. Well, when I say makes sense, not advice as such, but it mathematically makes sense because you are starting to invest earlier in life. So therefore you get to tap into the power of compounding interest earlier. And obviously the more time you have to invest, typically speaking, subject to market returns, the better your portfolio is going to be looking further down the track. So as you can see, there are many great benefits to using this type of strategy, but there are also lots of things that you need to know and understand before you go and borrow money and start doing this. And I have to say, if your ears are pricking up and you're thinking, gosh, I need to do this, can I strongly recommend it after you've listened to this episode, you go and grab a copy of Mindful Money, which is my second book, and I have a chapter dedicated to this. And I use case studies, I use examples, I break everything down. And in fact, I have 2 different strategies that I talk about using this, similar to this type of strategy. One is called the financial fast, and that's about going, aggressively and building up your wealth using this type of strategy. And the other one is called sexy slow strategy. So you've got case studies and examples, and I go into way more detail than I am in this particular podcast. So definitely grab a book of Mindful Money, and I will link it in the podcast notes. All right, so I'm now going to give you an example of debt recycling if you're still a bit confused by it. Say, for example, I have an $800,000 home, a home that I live in, and I have a $500,000 mortgage, okay? So technically I have $300,000 worth of equity, okay? Now, say I go to the bank and I say to the bank, look, I really want to start investing. I want to borrow some money secured against my home and invest that money, and we'll say, for example, into a diversified investment portfolio of, say, shares. Now, the bank will look at my application. They'll look at what I earn. They'll look at my repayment history. And they'll also get a bank val done, which is a bank valuation where someone will come out to my property, spend about 20 minutes walking around, looking at it, taking photographs, and come back in a couple of days and say, all right, your home, which you thought was worth $800,000, is actually worth $850,000 or $900,000 or whatever it may be. And the bank will look at the total equity and a whole range of other variables. And they will say, yes, we can lend you, if you want, up to, for example, $100,000 based on your serviceability and all these other things. So you then take that $100,000. Now, that $100,000 is set up through a separate investment loan. Okay, it's not combined in with that $500,000 one. It sits as a different loan in your internet banking. And I can, for example, take that $100,000 and go and invest it in whatever I want. Now, this is a long-term strategy, okay? It's something that you wouldn't just do as a quick fix, get rich quick scheme. That simply won't work. But what the principle or the, ultimate outcome behind this strategy is, I continue on my merry way, paying off my home loan, that $500,000 home loan, and obviously, of course, servicing the new loan repayments on the $100,000 loan. And continue on my merry way, not changing any loan terms or anything like that. So I'm on track to paying off my home loan. However many years down the track, depending on what my loan term was and how far into it, I've eventually paid off my home, which is great, which is what my plan was. But in the meantime, I've invested that $100,000. I've allowed it to compound and grow, perhaps with dividend reinvestment ideally, and maybe slowly even chipping away at that $100,000 loan if I wanted to, which I'll come to in a second. And now that portfolio, 15, 20, whatever many years down the track is worth not $100,000, but it's worth $300,000. And guess what? I now have my home paid out. Now, what that means is I've actually got assets other than my family home. I have other assets that actually not only just grow in value like my home might do, but actually that pay me an income stream. And if I use very, very simple terms of, say, a portfolio that's now worth $300,000, excluding whatever loan might be left to it, there's potentially, assuming an average income return of 5%, there's $15,000 a year in passive income that I can take for myself and live off if I want, obviously after servicing whatever remaining debt is on that investment loan. Now, of course, that's not going to pay for my retirement, but it might supplement my retirement income. Or it might mean that I can potentially cut down to work, say, 4 days a week instead of 5 days a week, or it might pay for my holiday each year. It's really up to you. So you've got to think of this as accessing the equity within your home. Yes, you are borrowing to invest, which comes with risks, but you're able to spread your eggs into other baskets, but those baskets that can then return the favor back to you by providing you with a form of financial freedom and independence through that passive income. Now, there are lots and lots of things you need to know before you do this strategy, and that's what I really want to talk to you about, debt recycling. Not just explain what it is, but actually talk about the things you need to think about and consider and even calculate and map out and become devil's advocate and question before you jump in. All right, so the first obvious thing is you need to have sufficient equity. If you've only just bought your home, even though you're going on really well with paying it off, you've got to have sufficient equity, whether it be through capital growth of the property or whether it be you paying it off. You don't want to ever be in a position where you have to, trigger an LVR where the banks say, yes, you can borrow this money, but you'll have to pay mortgage insurance. That is potentially a waste of money. If you listen to my podcast with Adam McCabe, my personal mortgage broker, and we talk about mortgage insurance, you're essentially paying a lot of money for the bank's protection. And a lot of people would argue, including myself, that it's an expensive waste of money. So you need to have equity, and obviously you need to have a strong cash flow to service normal mortgage and the new investment loan as well, which I'll come to in a second. Now, if you're going to do something like this, you also need to consider what you're actually investing in, how diversified that is. The whole point of borrowing to invest is to spread your eggs, as I said. So you might want to think about where you're going to invest that money to help, smooth out any volatility on your overall wealth. So you might want to think about buying in that borrowing money to buy another type of property, that perhaps an investment property, maybe in another street or another suburb, or even in another state, because obviously not all the property market doesn't move in positive correlation with each other. Different pockets, different markets do perform differently. And obviously then you add in the fact that it's a rental property, the dynamics change again. Or if you're going to be investing in shares, you want to make sure that that money is properly diversified. You don't put it all in one stock. You'd want to look at spreading it across different companies and different industries. And that's where the power of listed investment companies and ETFs can come in really handy, because you outsource those big investment decisions. You also need to take into consideration, and this is the biggest risk, your home is up for grabs if you can't make your mortgage repayments. So if I borrowed that $100,000 and I start skipping my mortgage repayments and defaulting and the bank start contacting me, there is a strong chance that the bank could seize my home to repay not just a $500,000 loan, and I'm literally homeless. Yes, I've got some cash, but I've then got to get back into the property market again and pay stamp duty again and buy back into a potentially more expensive market. So this is not something for everyone. Please bear that in mind. Now, to help manage that risk in a more proactive manner and in a sensible, wise manner, you would look at your budget and your cash flow. In my example, not only would I need to make sure that I can service my existing mortgage of $500,000, I'd also need to make sure I could factor into my cash flow and my budget the new loan repayments or interest repayments on that $100,000 loan. So I've essentially got two mortgages to manage now. And I also need to factor in interest rate rises on both loans, assuming that they are not fixed but variable. So I need to think, okay, what would the mortgage repayments look like on my $500,000 mortgage? Could I still keep my head above water? And what would the new repayments be on my $100,000 investment loan with a 3.5% interest rate rise on top of what I'm currently paying? Would I still be okay? Would I still survive financially? So you really need to play devil's advocate and question everything. And that's not to say you go, oh God, I couldn't survive, I won't do this, close the book, end of that chapter, on to the next. No, it just may mean that maybe perhaps you need to look at borrowing a smaller amount of money initially, see how you go, see how you're managing, and then look to maybe slowly and steadily increase that loan. And I should also point out that $100,000 loan that the bank may give me in that example, I don't need to go and invest that full $100,000. I might choose of that $100,000 loan to go and invest 20 of that, which means I would only be paying interest on the $20,000 withdrawn, because you only pay interest on what you're actually taking out of the loan. I could literally let it sit there, not touch that money, not pay any interest if I'm not using that money. So I could almost use a dollar cost averaging strategy where I invested $10,000 a month for 10 months to use that money, or invested $20,000 initially, paying the interest on that $20,000 loan, and then 5 months later take a $30,000. So now there's $50,000 in borrowing. So there are obviously ways to be slow and steady with this. The other thing is you need to take into consideration, this is not a quick fix strategy, it's a long-term strategy. 15, 20, 30 years even. You're not going to make money overnight, or at least you're not supposed to technically make money overnight. This is about building and growing long-term passive income streams. And if you go and do this, or even if you've already gone and done this, make sure you just cast an eye over your personal insurances. Make sure that your life cover, your TPD cover, your trauma cover, even your income protection is up to speed with what you need and all the new additional financial responsibilities that you carry in your life. I know as a financial planner, whenever a client has increased their borrowing to invest, we've increased their investment loan, it's tracking really nicely and working really well for them. We always go and check how much life cover they have. And if we've increased the investment loans, well, then we will quite often look to increase the life cover so that if anything happens to them, the family never need to worry about those financial stresses and responsibilities. And of course, it goes without saying, debt recycling is not a strategy that we use on its own. It's not a solo strategy. It's a strategy that you would use in combination with a variety of different strategies, such as a really good salary sacrificing strategy, or a great cash flow and budgeting strategy and a great debt reduction strategy for the mortgage. It's not just something necessarily that you do, that's it, I'm doing debt recycling and I'm not doing anything else. When it comes to financial planning, as I said, it's all about maximizing as many choices and options for you. And you do that by looking at all the different areas of what financial and personal wealth encompasses. So yes, it is probably one of the most powerful ones for some people, but you need to look at other things you can do on top of that help complement the outcome and results and efficiency of this strategy. And as I mentioned, you can start small. You don't necessarily have to go in head first. You can start it small and steady and slowly use that full $100,000 or whatever the bank gives you. And also, having said that, you might borrow the full amount that the bank lends you because you've got a really strong cash flow and you know that you can handle interest rate rises and so forth. But then in 5 years' time, you might go, you know what, it's going really well. I'm really happy with the strategy. I'm now going to borrow another $100,000. Just financial planning is not set and forget. It's about tweaking and changing, adjusting your strategy as your life naturally evolves. Okay? Now, you also want to take into consideration what you're actually investing in because, as we know, in this new interest rate environment, interest is expensive. So you want to make sure you're using borrowed money to acquire assets that will ideally provide returns that exceed your costs in the long run. Okay, that may not necessarily be achievable now because obviously interest rates are much higher than what they previously were, and maybe some dividends aren't paying the same amount. So there'll be, technically a loss, but again, that's where the tax efficiency comes in. But you would never look to borrow money to then go invest it in something like a term deposit where the long-term average return can quite often be less than the long-term cost of the interest. And this is why this type of what we call high-risk strategy lends itself to growth or high-growth profile investors because they use that borrowed money to acquire two-dimensional assets, which are high growth or growth assets, which are very volatile over the short to medium term, but long-term, when managed well and invested well, can provide great returns in the long run and have that element of growing passive income through the rent or the dividends. And classic examples, international shares, Australian shares, and property. Now, there are other things to take into consideration. Obviously, you're receiving dividends if you're investing in shares or listed investment companies or even ETFs. Now, you've got a couple of different options when you're using this as an asset class. With those dividends, you can use them to help pay and service that loan and maybe even help pay off that loan. Or if you want, you can set up an automatic dividend reinvestment plan if that's available, where, for example, in that $100,000 is invested, say it pays me $5,000, I have that money reinvested back into the portfolio for compounding growth opportunities. Now that can be, this is not advice, that can be a great way to really help organically grow your portfolio if you're servicing the cash flow quite well. As I mentioned, you can take that money if you wish, even spend it, but normally people would use it to help service the loan if they need to. And then, of course, the other option is, if you're really hands-on, is you might have those dividends paid to a separate dedicated savings account where they can sit and accumulate, and when they hit a certain level, you go and pick a new stock to invest in or a new investment so that your portfolio is continuing to diversify and help manage and reduce that risk. So there's three different options that are pretty flexible when it comes to shares being the asset behind this debt recycling strategy. The other option is you're using this debt recycling strategy to acquire property. You buy a property with that borrowed money and you receive rent. Now, obviously rent, when it in that type of an asset class like property, you can't reinvest like you can with shares, but that rental income stream would help pay for or supplement the interest that you have to pay to the bank on that investment loan. And that's whether it's cash flow positive or cash flow negative or cash flow neutral, that helps obviously service those loans, again, keeping in mind the difference between the two. And of course, as previously mentioned, you never want to trigger mortgage insurance. You've got to be really careful of your LVR, which is why it's important you have enough and even plenty of equity to do this in a safe, sensible way. Now, I want to talk to you quickly about how this loan is set up from a banking point of view. As I mentioned, it's a separate investment loan, so it's not combined with that $500,000 loan. So you're not going to see your $500,000 loan jump to $600,000. No, you'll see your $500,000 loan stay as it is, and this new investment loan of $100,000 will appear in your internet banking as a separate loan, okay? The reason why that is done is you must be able to demonstrate to the ATO what is your non-deductible debt and what is your deductible debt. It also keeps it nice and clean and easy to understand, particularly when it comes to tax time and working out exactly what your interest is deductible and what is not. Now, with that investment loan, most banks will automatically put any investment loan as an interest-only term, which basically means you're only ever having to pay the interest on that loan. You're never actually reducing the principal. And they do it for a good reason, because it makes sense financially to try and pay off your home loan as a priority, which is why why your home loan stays as a P&I loan, principal and interest, so you're paying it off slowly and steadily over time. Now that, in a nutshell, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. However, at times, for clients, and I will even put my hand up and say me too, there have been times where, even though it might be really efficient and savvy and smart to set up a particular strategy in a certain way, sometimes it's actually not about that. It's about tapping into and understanding someone's personal, unique needs and even concerns. And for that reason, some people may choose to actually ask the bank not to set their investment loans up as interest only, but to set them up as principal and interest, so that not only is their home loan coming down, their investment loans are also coming down. Now, yes, that is not technically the best strategy because it's not as tax effective, but it gives people comfort knowing that their overall debts are slowly and steadily reducing. Okay. And if people are really trying to grow and build long-term passive income streams that are cash flow positive as quickly and as easily as possible, it can make sense to do it in that type of style and strategy. And again, that's why you'd go and talk to a financial planner and an accountant and even a mortgage broker to help guide you as to whether you're interest only or principal and interest. And of course, then that conversation comes in as whether you fixed or whether you've gone variable, or it's part variable and part fixed. I mean, there are so many different ways of doing it, but I just want to share that with you because some people will go, oh no, the thought of having an interest only loan terrifies me because it never comes down. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. You can actually have it set up as principal and interest. And as I said, not advice, but some of my investment loans have been and are currently principal and interest. Even though it's actually not that financially savvy for me to do that, I should be focusing all of my cash flow on the home. I prefer knowing that my investments are cash flow positive. I like that peace of mind. That gives me comfort. That's where my value system lies. So not advice, but I'm just sharing that with you as a personal insight. Now, if you're going to do this, another thing you need to think about, particularly if you're a young family, and that is, obviously, as I mentioned, you need to look at your cash flow, your budget. Can you afford to do both loans? Can you afford to handle interest rate rises? The other question is are you going to have any changes of income or change in expenses? For example, you might be thinking about having a child or a baby or a couple more babies further down the track, and your incomes, gross income as a family household may change. It may drop because you're taking time out to raise children. That's something to think about if you're looking at this type of strategy, because it's a long-term strategy. And again, that doesn't mean you don't do it. It just means you may have to reduce the amount that you're initially thinking of borrowing to invest. And of course, what if there are some expenses coming in? You might be thinking, well, we've got 3 kids, we're not having any more, but you know what? We might want to maybe look at putting them into, private school perhaps. And of course, they come with exorbitant fees. Could we still afford to do this debt recycling strategy and handle the cost of school fees as well? As I said, I'm playing devil's advocate for your protection and benefit. These are things to think about. And, never think, oh, that's disappointing, we couldn't actually do both. That's okay. There will be times when you can look at this, and there'll be times where you can maybe make up for lost time through other additional strategies as well. And of course, it doesn't mean you take your finger off the pulse when it comes to building wealth. Absolutely not. You can look at your superannuation and what you're doing there. You can look at your, debt reduction strategy, how you're paying off your mortgage, how you're tracking, what you do to pay off the home loan faster. Your personal insurances, what's going on there? What's going on with the budgeting and cash flow and savings? Like, there's lots of things you can do in the meantime. So don't be disheartened if you think, I'd love to do this, but I just can't right now. There will be the right time for you, but just keep your finger on the pulse and keep your goals and keep your vision front of mind so that you can and you will get there. Now, Finally, I want to share with you a little hack of mine personally in handling this type of strategy, and that is called front loading. It's actually a budgeting hack, to be honest with you, but what I try and do is front load our essential responsibilities. So I get paid, Tom gets paid at the end of the month, I get paid at the beginning of the month. I think he gets paid around the 26th or 27th of the month, I get paid on the 1st. So what I try and do is have as many as possible of the large bills come out a day or a couple of days after we've been paid. So we'll have the mortgage repayments, we'll have the investment loan repayments come out, but we'll also have our utilities, we'll have our personal insurances, our home and contents insurance, even the pet insurance, we'll have our private health insurance, all those big, bad, ugly bills, we will front load. And that means we have what we're left with, it's easier to ration. We don't get this false sense of security of going, halfway through the month or a third of the way through the month going, wow, we still have so much money in our family account. We can splurge a bit more here and there, and then find a week later that we forgot that the mortgage has to come out, the investment loan has to come out, the strata might have to come out, the private health insurance comes out, the gym membership, and it just compounds, and all of a sudden you see your account suddenly go from looking very abundant and prosperous to literally flatlining, dropping quickly and then flatlining. So it gives me great peace of mind going, we got the heavy lifting stuff, heavy lifting bills sorted as a priority out of the way, and we now know how to ration what is left throughout the rest of the pay cycle. And it helps me a lot in managing our budgets and our cash flow as a busy working family. Now, people who use this, what happens at the very end of the day when they've paid off their home and they've got this is growing in property in front of them, what do they do then? Well, this is the cool thing about the wealth creation journey and the debt recycling strategy. They have choices. They can decide what they want to do then, what is appropriate and feels comfortable for them. They could maybe sell that investment portfolio and live off the proceeds if they want. They might sell the portfolio, and if there's some debt left over, pay the rest of that off if it's still there, particularly if it's been kept as an interest-only loan. Or they might think, I earn passive income from this. I can use this to maybe help supplement my retirement or pay for some of my lifestyle expenses, such as travel overseas each year. Or if they want, they can keep going. They can go back to the bank and borrow another $100,000 or $300,000, or they can simply, start paying off the remaining debt if there is any left, or set up a regular investment plan, pretty much like a regular savings plan, where they continue on investing and growing that investment portfolio, knowing that their home is paid off, that frees up that monthly repayment, which for most people is a lot of money, and they can put that towards the continued growth of that investment portfolio. So this is how you are able to make the most of time, benefit from time, have the best of both worlds, in that you are focusing on your debt reduction goals of paying off your home loan and investing at the same time. And of course, we do need to take into consideration the fact that you may not necessarily pay off your home as quickly as you would have been if you didn't have that investment loan to service, but the benefit is potentially, depending on what you invest in, you are acquiring something that helps reduce your overall risk and that you're diversifying, but allows you to tap into potentially an asset that's going to grow over the long run at a faster rate, but one that is actually providing you with passive income. Because remember, your home is not an investment asset. It doesn't provide you with a passive income. Yes, it might grow with capital growth, but so does everyone else's next to you, your next door neighbor. So if you're relying on that, you need to be aware of, okay, I can sell my house at any day, but you've also got to live somewhere else and buy back in. So you need to take that into consideration. So this is why people use this. And of course, it helps use your tax dollars more efficiently. And I've seen this, and I have recommended this strategy. I've used this strategy myself personally. It is a strategy that is definitely high risk, but when managed correctly, at the right time, and for the right long-term reasons, it's incredibly powerful in creating the feeling and reality of actually building wealth and seeing your gross financial figure grow, and of course your net financial figure grow. But you've got to manage your debts and all the risks in a sensible, wise way and also in a proactive manner. Now, for anyone that is listening to do this, promise me you will never overextend yourself with this because it is high risk. And you promise me that you will go and speak to your financial planner, you'll speak to your mortgage broker, and you'll speak to your accountant and get sound advice before you put anything in place. And of course, you listen to this podcast again, you go through everything that I've spoken about, you grab a copy of Mindful Money, you refer to Kim and Paul's case study in Mindful Money, and you consider the different ways of doing this, whether it be financially fast wealth creation or whether it be sexy, slow wealth creation. It's completely up to you. And you can choose, change, tweak, and restructure this type of strategy at any given point in your life. Nothing is ever set and forget. It is all about creating choice and flexibility that evolves with you and your needs. All right, everyone, thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. Please make sure you leave a rating and review, and I will see you next Monday morning on Sugar Mama's Fire Play. Ciao for now.